is our microphone on here?
Yes.
I've been standing up here, not watching you fill the room, but waiting for the technical person to arrive. And maybe we won't get one, so then it'll be up to all of us to figure out how to do this. Well, good afternoon. My name is Becky Norton Dunlop, and I'm a vice president at the Heritage Foundation and served as Secretary of Natural Resources in Virginia and Assistant Secretary of Interior when the greatest president in my lifetime was president. And who do you think that was?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. Indeed. We're delighted to have you here. It's always fabulous to have a packed room when we're talking about truth. It's a wonderful thing to know about truth. We have some great panelists with you today, and this is the technical man.
Certain issue?
We just didn't know how to use the equipment. And,
Okay.
I'm good to go with my presentation.
Which
we
presentation
have,
do you want to go
where are the
first?
talking points at the end?
So which one would you like first?
Well, Congressman Flores is going
Mine's on the
first.
memory stick, and so I'll drive it when it's time.
Yeah.
And then-
Are you going to be in here for the programs?
No, actually, that's why. Do you know which?
Absolutely. Oh, that's somebody else? Okay.
We conservatives are great at being flexible, right?
And flexible being great.
Patience, ultimately we win. They lose.
I've done many of these like panels, and this is by far the best attended.
Oh, really? That's good to hear.
I've been at one where there was like, 15 people, and 5 of them were for the group. So,
This ought to be cool.
so this is good.
And you knew where the final slide is, where I had all the points I was asked to submit.
I'll just plug it in and drive one this time. Yeah, we're cool.
Right now.
Good, nice bottle of water. Did you find that there, or was that yours?
Yeah, I just found it.
I'm sorry, we don't have another one. Do you need one? I can ask somebody to go.
No, it's okay. I've been drinking it.
Oh, yeah, okay, good, okay.
I don't know. Is it?
Something else. You found it, all right, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering.
I found it was closed.
I think that's. No, that's not. Yeah, put that up.
What?
Last panel kind of hurt our timing a little bit, didn't they?
Yeah, and so we'll hurt the next one.
It's Cascades.
Sorry about this.
Okay, we're ready to roll. You know, one of these days, if we have an electromagnetic pulse attack, we'll all be suffering with this lack of technology. So, another good reason to be here. Well, we have some great speakers for you today, and then some great take-home reminders for you. So we're going to get started. I've asked all of our speakers to keep their remarks to about 6 minutes. One of my speakers, Joe Bast, had to leave the conference, and I will tell you the reason he left is because a great scientist, Willie Soon, is under attack by the left. And he asked Joe to come up to be with he and his family for a couple of days as they're working through all these attacks. So Myron is going to replace him and talk a little bit about some of the fabrications of the people we're talking about today. But I'm going to go through all of the introductions of the people who are speaking and then ask them to just come up in order. And then at the end, I'll be making some remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll go through the final points that we'll have on the board. Our first speaker today is Congressman Bill Flores from Texas. Not all Texans are experts in energy, but this Texan is. He was elected to the House of Representatives in November of 2010, and he's serving his third term, representing the 17th Congressional District of Texas. He serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He's a ninth-generation Texas, raised in the Texas Panhandle. He has an MBA, a BBA in accounting. So he's a really smart guy, and he does know about energy as well. He served 3 decades as CFO, CEO, or COO of several companies. He's been married for 36 years. He now resides in Bryan, Texas, and he is going to be our first speaker today. Our second speaker will be Myron Ebell. Myron is the director of the Competitive Enterprise Institute's Center for Energy and Environment, which is a tremendously successful advocate for free market environmentalism. He chairs what is known here in town as the Cooler Heads Coalition. It's an ad hoc coalition of 28 nonprofit groups that question global warming alarmism and oppose energy rationing policies. The Business Insider commented that Myron Ebell may be enemy #1 to the current climate change community. That's great. That's just great. Myron comes from Oregon, where he grew up on a cattle ranch. He earned degrees at Colorado College and the London School of Economics. Our third speaker will be Andrew Langer. Andrew is president of the Institute for Liberty, where he has been since 2008. The Institute works on a variety of issues promoting and protecting small business, linking trade and prosperity, tilting against the regulatory state. But at the organization's core and Andrew's, his desire is to promote freedom and individual rights. He's been involved in this battle for nearly 20 years, and he used to be a regulatory affairs lobbyist for the National Federation of Independent Businesses. So today he's going to talk to you about the importance of citizens being involved in the regulatory process. Our final speaker is Gary Broadbent. Gary is the Assistant General Counsel and Media Director at Murray Energy Corporation, the largest privately held coal company in the United States. If you've been warm this winter, thank Gary.
Don't thank me, thank a coal miner.
Gary is representing his boss today, Mr. Murray, who had to go into the hospital, which was a surprise to all of us, and our thoughts and prayers are with him. At Murray Energy, Gary is responsible for a wide variety of legal matters, including environmental, regulatory, and mine safety litigation, commercial transaction, financial reporting, and some government affairs. He got his JD from Case Western Reserve Law School, and he'll be our final speaker. And then I'll come up and talk a little bit about principles and why principles are important, and we'll go through our action items for the day. So, Congressman Flores, welcome to the podium.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Becky, for the nice introduction. I want to start by saying one of the things that Becky didn't say is I'm honored to be the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. It's the biggest, most effective, most passionate group of conservatives in Congress. And we've got 3 members of the Republican Study Committee staff with us today. Let me get this loaded up real quickly, if I can. That's the wrong one.
No, it's
wrong folder.
Top right.
It's on the desktop, if you minimize that.
Oh, it's on the desktop. Okay. So, okay.
There you go.
I didn't realize it's already been copied. So, where is the? But y'all didn't think I could drive that, did you? So anyway, some of us old guys can do that. Anyway, I'm pleased to have 3 members of the Republican Study Committee team with me today. I've got Caitlin, Cameron, and Kelly. So you guys hold your hands up. They're with me. They helped. They were integral, along with my team back in my personal office, to help put this presentation together. As you know, what the title of the panel is "Climate: What Tom Steyer Isn't Telling You." And I think it's important for us to know what he's not telling you. First of all, I want to say this. It's great to be at CPAC 2015. It's an honor to see so many passionate conservatives that care about this country, the greatest nation on this earth, that want to stand up for the freedom that was hard fought and then want to preserve it for generations to come. It's also great to see our newest, youngest generations of conservatives here and so passionate, because you're where the future is in terms of advancing the conservative cause moving forward. Let me start off by saying this. In order to have a great American future, we've got to have energy security. And this administration has done everything it can to stop or thwart American energy production. Now, the private sector's been able to overcome those headwinds, but it's getting tougher and tougher. And at the same time, they're trying to stop domestic energy production. They're spending billions on failed green energy programs like Solyndra, and we've seen that. Now, there's a lot that Tom Steyer won't tell you about the Obama-Steyer climate objective, or the climate agenda that many liberals have. Here are the 6 inconvenient truths about that agenda that I think you need to know. It kills U.S. jobs. It costs trillions of dollars. It's based on junk science. It's based on fantasy technology. And it uses manipulated cost-benefit data. And last, and it doesn't even pass the smell test. And we're going to go through a little of each of these. Now, yesterday, I got to sit through a hearing with EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy, and all she kept telling me was, just trust us. Okay? So let's have a little audience involvement. How many of you don't trust the EPA? Okay, me too. Now, we're supposed to trust the bureaucrats in Washington and liberals like Barack Obama and Tom Steyer know more about how to create jobs and live our lives than we do. And we know better. Who makes the regulations that we're supposed to just trust? Well, until April of 2013, the EPA's top climate expert was a man named John Beal. How many of you have heard that name before? Okay, well, the rest of you are going to find out about this guy. He was a close advisor to the EPA administrator, and he wrote many of the climate regulations over the past several years. Now, where's John Beal today? The graphic says that he's in jail. In late 2013, he was sentenced to 32 months in jail for falsely claiming to be a CIA officer and a Vietnam veteran. For 13 years, he lied to the EPA and to the American people and defrauded taxpayers out of nearly $1 million by pretending to take secret spy trips in lieu of fulfilling his duties at the EPA. Now, sorry, President Obama, I don't trust your bureaucrats any farther than I can throw them. Now, here's some more inconvenient truths. Let's go through the individual inconvenient truths about the Obama energy agenda. It kills Americans' jobs. Now, there are a lot of different things I could talk about. I could talk about multiple agencies. I could talk about multiple laws, but I'm going to focus on 2. One are some ozone regs that came out recently, and the second are Waters of the U.S., which came out a little earlier last year. The Friday after Thanksgiving, a big news day, the EPA rolls out its new ozone regs, and they want to propose a 20 to 25% cut in ozone levels. It's the most expensive regulation ever in the history of this world, point blank. By 2040, it would cost nearly 3 million jobs. And here's what it simply does. It increases the cost of doing business in America beyond what is reasonable. And when you increase the cost of business beyond what's reasonable, people move elsewhere and they take American jobs and paychecks with them. And so while we do this, Obama is exporting American jobs to China, India, and other countries with fewer regulations, and they send us their pollution. So no matter how much the EPA tightens U.S. standards, foreign-produced background pollution is going to come back into this country, particularly from Asia, traveling across the Pacific Ocean, including our environment. So, again, this is what the liberal agenda wants to do with climate. They want to export our jobs and import their pollution. The next inconvenient truth is it's going to cost trillions of dollars. Every day we feel the impact of their out-of-control regulations. We feel the impact when we fill up our cars, when we heat our homes, and when we check our electric bill. Protecting jobs and keeping energy costs low are 2 of the best things that we can do to help struggling American families today, more of whom are living paycheck to paycheck than ever before. By 2040, the EPA's ozone emission standards will eliminate $3.5 trillion in economic output. Now, how much is $3.5 trillion? If you stack $3.5 trillion bills together, you get almost 85% of the way to the moon. It only costs NASA $110 billion to get to the moon. If the EPA wants to touch the moon, it ought to call NASA instead of what it's doing today. Now, the EPA climate agenda is based on junk science. The EPA justifies its strict ozone standards by saying that they can improve health benefits for Americans. But their assumptions are too often based on faulty science. There was a recent medical study that found no link between ozone and higher asthma rates in U.S. cities. Now, why is that? It's because we brought our ozone levels way down today under existing standards. The study did find, however, that poverty not ozone, is the most single important determinant as to whether a person is more likely to get asthma or not. So if you really want to improve people's health, killing jobs, raising their cost of living, and putting them in poverty is the absolute last thing that Obama should be doing. Now, the EPA climate agenda is faced, whoops, I need to go back one. I was a little quick on the draw there. The EPA climate change is based on fantasy technology. And just to summarize this, here's what the EPA says. It says they don't know how to get to their proposed lower levels because the technology doesn't exist. At their last standard, 67% of the control technology that they want to use to achieve these standards doesn't exist. Not to worry with the EPA. They said, but it'll only cost about $15,000 per ton of ozone reduction to get to that level. What's the real world price today for ozone reduction? $175,000 to $250,000 per ton. So it's junk economics too. It's fantasy technology. So as the standards get tighter, the more unrealistic they become. The background ozone level at Yellowstone National Park is 66 parts per billion, higher than the proposed standards. What are we supposed to do? Close the park to visitors? If we did, that won't change the ozone level. We're talking about profound changes to how our American economy operates, all based on assumptions instead of reality. We'll talk more about this during Q&A. The EPA agenda uses manipulated cost-benefit data. There's a name for what the EPA does. It's called regulatory malpractice. It's interesting to note that the EPA's economics for its latest ozone proposal excludes the cost of ozone reduction in California because the EPA assumes that California will not meet the ozone standards for the foreseeable future. So we can't just pull them out of the equation. And so now, do you think it's because of economics or because California's a blue state and Tom Steyer lives there? How many of you think economics? How many of you think politics? Okay, I'm with you. 6, the EPA climate doesn't pass the smell test. The EPA regulations can just border on ridiculous. Let me say it this way. In the waters, the EPA is proposing to change the definition of the waters of the U.S. from navigable waters to virtually every piece of water that's around here. So if rain falls in a farmer's field, they think they can regulate it. Now, what should we do? Let's stay involved. You can tell Tom Steyer what you think about what he's doing by going to Twitter. Find out Tom Steyer and use the hashtag, tweet at Tom. You can tell that Barack Obama that hashtag bring back our energy. And I'd like to hear from you too. At Brett Bill Flores, thanks for having me today, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you.
I think you're there.
Yeah, you should be.
You want me to load you up?
Yes.
Okay. I can do that. Oops, wrong one. You are right. It's supposed to be right there. You are this one here. Where's that little symbol there? Here you go. Drive on.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here today. I want to thank CPAC for inviting me to speak with this distinguished panel. Thank you, Becky, and thank you all for coming. It's a cold day, and it makes one's thoughts turn to global climate disruption. I want to start in 1992. That's when President Bush flew to Rio for the Earth Summit and signed the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That was when the leaders of almost every country in the world decided to put a noose around the global economy. And it has taken some decades to tighten that noose, but it is starting to get tight. The next step after 1992 was during the Clinton administration when Bill Clinton and Al Gore cooked up what became the Kyoto Protocol. Now, you will recall that the U.S. Senate never ratified the Kyoto Protocol, but if you want to thank President George W. Bush for that, that's okay. But in fact, he did virtually nothing to stop the tightening of the noose. So we go next to President Obama, who is part of this agenda. I don't know why. As a legislator and a senator, he was never interested in environmental issues. Oh, I do know why. It's how you take control of the U.S. economy through environmental regulations over energy use. If you control what kind of energy people can use and how much, you control the economy. So, that's where we got to the beginning of the Obama administration. I want to shift now and tell you just a couple of things about the science, and then also a couple of slides that Joe Bast might approve of. I'm sorry he's not here. But for anybody in the room who's under 18 years of age, you have not experienced any global warming, right? There has been no global warming for the past 18 years. No increase in the global mean temperature. What has there been? There's been an increase in the model projections of how much warming there should be. All those squiggly lines are computer models. This was put together by John Christie. The little dots and triangles at the bottom are the satellite temperature data and the balloon temperature data. They agree quite closely. They don't agree with the model projections. Now, since we've all had some science in school, some of us here are scientists, when confronted with this kind of divergence, what do you do? Do you trust the models or do you trust the data? No, you trust the models. Every 97% of the world's climate scientists say, trust us. We've got the models and we know it's going to get warmer. So if the models and the data don't agree, you switch the data. Here's something that NASA GISS did. The top graph is the old temperature graph for the United States from 1880 to 2010. And they've just made the 1930s a lot cooler so that the past 2 decades look a lot warmer. So remember that. It's good science. If the data and the models disagree, go with the models. Here's an example of the kind of deception that we've lived under. This is the infamous hockey stick that Michael Mann fabricated, and that it took somebody outside of the climate science community to discover the statistical sleight of hand that resulted in this so-called hockey stick. Now, let me just say, what is the result of all this climate change we've seen and all these CO2 emissions? Well, starting in the 18th century, we had a steady state world, a steady state in terms of CO2 emissions, per capita income, and life expectancy. Since the modern energy revolution began and we started emitting a lot of CO2 from burning coal, oil, and natural gas, the world is a much happier, healthier, more populated place. Everything is going up. Now, look at this. The middle, the dots, that's this increases in CO2 levels. It tracks pretty closely with increases in food production. The increase in temperature is down on the bottom. It doesn't track well at all. So, what is Obama up to? He is pursuing global warming policy, not just at EPA, not just against the coal industry, as Gary Broadbent will talk about from Murray Energy. He is, every single department of the U.S. government, every agency now has climate programs. The Department of Defense now claims that global warming is the greatest national security threat.
Next to right-wing extremists, obviously.
Yeah, well, okay. John Kerry, the Secretary of State, his first speech as secretary was about how climate change was going to be his #1 priority as Secretary of State. He gave that at the University of Virginia Law School. Now, this might explain why we have these problems around the world, because we have a Secretary of State and a President who are focused on global warming and not on what they consider to be lesser problems. So we have here, I just want to summarize my key points. I was told to bring 3 slides, so I brought 10, but here are the 3. The science is settled. Global warming is not a crisis. The energy rationing policies being implemented are much worse than the impacts of global warming. The President is pursuing policies that have little support in the Congress or with the public, and the polling and the voting shows that. And I just want to focus on one regulation, or two, the regulations for new and existing power plants. Those are the ones that affect coal-fired power plants. If he gets away with this, if Gina McCarthy and the EPA can do this, if they can finalize these regulations without Congress overturning them or without the Murray Energy lawsuit blocking them, they will turn all of the growing heartland economies like Indiana, Ohio, Texas, Kentucky, they will start looking like California and New York, because the purpose of those policies is to raise energy prices. They've already done that in California with Governor Schwarzenegger and Governor Brown. They've already done that in New York. They've already done that in New England. Which economy do you want to live in? Moreover, there's a political difference between these two worlds, right? There's John Shadegg, who represented Arizona as a Republican. Well, Arizona has affordable energy. It's a Republican state. Which states don't have affordable energy? They're all the states that have implemented this climate agenda. So, for more information, here's where you go, but I want to tell you how to take action. We were supposed to have very simple things. So tell your senators and representatives to vote for an appropriations rider to block the EPA's Clean Power Plan, and tell your state legislators that the state should tell the EPA, no, we're not going to do it. And finally, if any of you doubt what this is all about, sometimes somebody on the other side lets it out of the bag. Some years ago, Jacques Chirac, when he was president of France, said, this is about a lot more than climate. This is the first genuine instrument of global governance. Christiana Figueres, the extremely capable head of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, said this month, and I will stop with this quote, "This is probably the most difficult task we have ever given ourselves," that is the UN, which is to intentionally transform the economic development model for the first time in human history. So if you think that this agenda is about saving the planet from global warming, it's a much bigger and more sinister thing than that. Thank you very much. Okay, you have to figure out how to do your own.
No, let's leave that up there. I don't even have a PowerPoint.
Oh, you can put mine up.
I could do that too. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Langer. I want to thank ACU and CPAC for having me on this panel. I also want to especially thank, there are some students in the audience from my high school in New York, the Fieldston School. I want to thank them for coming down. Greatly appreciate that. I'm going to talk about two things. I want to sort of give some further cost context to what the Congressman was talking about, a little bit about what Myron was talking about, in terms of regulatory costs, and talk about some regulatory tools. And then, given the fact that Joe Bast did fly to Boston to lend his friendship to Willie Soon, I want to talk about the role that this debate has in the overall war on oppositional and conservative speech, and the dangers that this poses, and tie it into something called Operation Choke Point. First off, as we talk about these costs, we know what they are in the macroeconomic sense. We know that every 5 years, the U.S. government itself, not some crazy right-wing think tank, produces a report on the cost of regulation, the direct cost of regulation, to the American economy each year. We know that in 2005, that number was just above $1.2 trillion. We know that number skyrocketed between 2005 and 2010 by an unprecedented 35% to $1.75 trillion. We know that that translates down for America's smallest businesses to about $11,000 per employee per year, which has a direct impact on jobs, as I know we'll talk about. The important thing to recognize is this does not come without some great cost. Regardless of where you are on the economic spectrum, you can be a von Mises free market Austrian economist who believes that government needs to get out of the way, or that government needs to produce fewer taxes, or you can believe in Keynesian economics that government needs to prime the pump. But the fact is we have right now a roughly $2 trillion hole in our American economy. Actually, I think when the report comes out later on this year, that number is going to be somewhere about $2.3 trillion annually. a massive hole in an economy that is only $15 trillion in size. So the point is, when these agencies enact these regulations, we need to be getting involved. I want to talk about, and the Congressman touched on this a little bit, he talked about cost-benefit analysis. There's another tool that I like to talk about, which is comparative risk assessment. My father's an environmental scientist. This is something that he raised to me when I was a kid. It's the idea that you should compare regulatory decisions against not doing something or doing something different or something that's being done somewhere else. So it's not just about whether or not the benefits of a regulation outweigh the costs of it. That only tells you if it's fiscally responsible. But comparative risk assessment tells you that when you raise the cost of energy on poor people, more poor people get sick, more poor people die. It has a direct impact on huge swatches of the economy overall. And it lets you prioritize what's important. Because frankly, if you ask most environmental scientists, regardless of this fictitious 97% number, global warming is not the #1 priority amongst even environmental scientists in terms of the greatest threats to public health and the environment. It's clean water worldwide. And yet you don't hear that in the mythos that's out there. Most importantly, thank you. Got it. Most importantly, what you need to do is get involved. Myron talked about writing your member of Congress. I want you all to take down regulations.gov, the most important website you can visit. It's an area in which we don't play very well. You can comment on regulations. Anybody can comment on regulations, regulatory proposals that are coming out of the agencies. And so you file your comments. And frankly, I urge you all, when you create your comments, create them for your friends. Send out links with your model comments to your friends and urge them to send comments in as well. It's the only way you can get involved. It's the only way you can challenge a regulation once it's implemented. It is something the agencies, if you file comments of substance, the agencies have to respond. And then, frankly, the numbers of comments that are out there is something that is talked about on Capitol Hill. Now, I'm going to leave it for the Q&A. I hope somebody asks me about this because I want to talk about the denigration and the exposure and the war on conservative speech and how this all relates to it and this issue of Operation Choke Point. But I'm going to end right here. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Broadbent. As Becky said, I'm Assistant General Counsel and Media Director for Murray Energy. And in case there's any doubt, I am not Bob Murray. Mr. Murray caught a flu bug, as Becky said. He's out of the hospital now and on the mend. So thank you for your thoughts and prayers. I've come to you today from St. Clairsville, Ohio, which is a little town of 5,000 people in coal country. Belmont County, Ohio. We're 9 miles from the Ohio River. We are 30 and 45 minutes from 2 of the most highly productive coal mines that we have in the United States. I spent the first 2 years of my career with Murray Energy working out of one of those coal mines. And I wish that I had good news for you, but I don't. The Obama administration has fundamentally destroyed the United States coal industry. Before Obama took office, coal represented 52% of our country's electricity generation. It's down to 37% today, and it's falling fast. 411 coal-fired power generating units have either closed or have been slated for closure between now and the end of 2016. 47% of the coal mines in central Appalachia have been closed. We've lost over 101,000 megawatts of coal-fired electricity. That's going to be, that's enough electricity to power over 100 million American homes. And what this all translates to are job losses. There have been tremendous job losses in the coal fields of the United States. There are thousands and thousands of coal miners that are out of work. And when those mines shut down, there's no other job in the area. The average coal miner in the state of Ohio, where I'm from, earns $85,000 a year. That's more than I made graduating from law school. once those jobs are gone, you know, some of our coal miners don't have high school degrees. You know, coal mining is their passion. It's their profession. It's all they know how to do. And once the mine closes, once the coal industry shuts down, there's no way that they can replace that income. There's no way that they can provide for their families like they've done in the past. We have 7,500 employees at Murray Energy. And I know Mr. Murray thinks about them every day. I think about them every day. I can guarantee you that Barack Obama does not think about them at all. Coal is the most affordable, reliable, and abundant source of energy that this world has ever known. We ought to be embracing it. Historically, coal has cost about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Natural gas, by comparison, is about 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Wind and solar is 22 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's after billions of dollars of subsidies from you and me. These increased energy costs hurt manufacturers and people who work for them. They hurt people who are on fixed incomes, our seniors. And they hurt people who are poor. I grew up poor, and I know what it's like when the power company shuts off your electricity. And I know what it's like to be in a house that's cold and dark and without power. There's 1 billion people on the earth today that have no access to electricity. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And yet, Barack Obama has wished it on every single one of us. Andrew, Myron, Representative Flores, and Becky have talked about how there's no environmental benefit from these regulations that have been imposed. Instead, it's just tremendous cost that's been saddling our economy and holding us back from truly recovering. It's nothing short of a political power grab of America's power grid. That's what Mr. Murray calls it, and he calls it right. But Murray Energy Corporation is fighting back. To date, we filed 4 lawsuits. Thank you. We filed 4 lawsuits, 2 of which preemptively challenge the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan, so-called Clean Power Plan, which is really a cap and tax regulation of existing coal-fired power plants. Those 2 lawsuits have been recognized by the Wall Street Journal as 2 of the premier litigation initiatives against this administration and its overreach, at least in the environmental arena. We're going to oral arguments on April 16th, just over here in the D.C. Court of Appeals, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you. We have more fights in the pipeline. I won't touch on them today, but I want to invite you to join our fight, to educate yourselves about the coal industry and the challenges we face, to contact your senators, your congressmen, your governors, your state utility commissioners, and let them know that this all-out war on coal, this power grab of America's power grid, has got to stop. They've got to cease and desist. Finally, we have to elect a pro-coal president in 2016, someone who's going to protect and defend coal miners, protect and defend their jobs, and defend the most affordable, reliable source of energy that this world has ever known, American coal. Thank you.
Well, I think all of our speakers did a great job. We want to have some time for questions. I just wanted to mention a couple things that I think it's important for us to remember as we, as we're leaving this room and going out to fight again another day. One is you need to be able yourselves to debunk the myths. Most of everything you've heard today debunks myths that Al Gore and Tom Steyer and his ilk have put out there. One of the things I think it's important for you to have in your library is this book, Unstoppable Global Warming Every 1,500 Years by Fred Singer and Dennis Avery. If you do not have a copy of this book, you need to get one. You need to read it. You need to understand the basis for the facts that we're arguing for and the lies and misrepresentations we're arguing against. And then you need to remember that principles need to guide us on public policy. We have a guiding set of principles for this country, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. When you're dealing with environmental policy, you have to have a guiding set of principles. Heritage has worked with a lot of scholars, and we've come up with 10 principles that are outlined in this book, The American Conservation Ethic. You need to get a copy of this and be thinking about principles that will guide you as you think about these issues and you talk to friends and neighbors. And then you have to come up with solutions. Poor Congressman Flores is on the Hill. Thousands of things are going on every day. Everything's coming over the transom. They're looking for solutions. The Heritage Foundation, again, has worked with a number of scholars, some at this very table, to develop the Environmental Policy Guide, 168 recommendations for environmental policy reform that's available on our website. Find solutions that you can really grab onto yourselves and talk about at the Rotary clubs, and then communicate effectively with your elected representatives at all levels about principles and solutions. Now, we want to open this up for questions. If you have a question, do raise your hand. I'm going to invoke the one breath rule. You have to be able to ask your question in one breath.
That's a good one.
The last point I want to make to you is, you know, we're fighting a battle in this country right now about net neutrality. In fact, we may have lost it by now.
Just passed it.
You know, net neutrality is a goal by this administration to keep you from getting the truth.
That's right.
This is just an example of an environmental fight that's not in the environmental field. So look around and see how many fights out there affect your ability to get truth and be a good citizen of this great nation. Okay, I see Peter, one breath.
Doesn't Congress have the power to repeal these regulations under the Congressional Review Act?
Congressman.
Yes, we have the power, but no, it's not feasible today, and here's why. Under the Congressional Review Act, we have the ability to introduce a resolution to veto a set of regulations. The practical problem is that the president will veto the veto, and therefore the regulations stay in place. What we proposed in the last two Congresses, and we'll propose it again in this Congress, is a better solution called the REINS Act. And the REINS Act would work this way. It would basically say Congress passes a statute, the rule makers write the rules. The rules don't go into effect until Congress affirms the rules if that particular set of rules would exceed a certain dollar value of economic impact. The Wall Street Journal said the REINS Act would be the single biggest improvement to the regulatory structure in this town that the country has ever, or that the government's ever had available to it. Hopefully someday, if we have the right president and we have a 60-vote margin in the Senate, or the vote margin changes in the Senate, then we can get the REINS Act in place, and we can stop these regulators dead in their tracks.
Okay, yes, right here. Identify yourself, please.
Sure, my name is Mike Steyer. 2 years ago, I wrote an article for the Huffington Post about Bob Murray, who was Ken Cuccinelli's top contributor in Virginia, out of global warming record, and I called him an extremist. I was sued for that. It was called defamation. And I wanted to know, in relation to Operation Choke Point, is it both offensive and defensive? Are you trying to silence your critics by filing these meritless lawsuits that tied me up in court for the better part of a year?
That was definitely more than one breath, but
Sure. I can tell you this. Mr. Murray started Murray Energy Corporation from scratch. He mortgaged his home to buy his first coal mine. He started that company in 1988. He started out working underground. He has built a company now that employs 7,500 people. He's built a reputation that is second to none in this industry. And it's a reputation that we're going to defend from statements like you've made. Absolutely. Absolutely.
okay. Gentleman right here, one breath. One breath.
Well, Tom Steyer is a billionaire based in California. He heavily lobbies Congress for green energy interests that he himself benefits from. And so essentially, it's a two-pronged strategy. It's sort of the ultimate in crony capitalism, right? He argues for greater regulation on his competitors, and then he works to get subsidies for his green energy boondoggles. So he makes out in both ways.
Okay, next question. Yes, right here.
Can anybody on the panel tell me what the price of carbon dioxide is?
In what market, sir? I mean, it's
I exhale
yes,
for
it's-
free every day,
it's-
so.
It's an artificially created market wherever it exists.
Okay, next question, right here, and then we'll go over to this side.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an ongoing theme in this administration, and it's different from what this gentleman is talking about in terms of the fact that when this administration has opponents, when the left has opponents, they go after the funders of it. They want greater exposure of who is going after this so they can bully people into no longer funding critical research and research that is skeptical of anthropogenic climate change. Operation Choke Point is a joint operation by the Department of Treasury, the Department of Justice, the FDIC, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's one that has been used to go after industries that the administration has no statutory or regulatory authority to shut down, yet as the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee just reported, that the administration has a personal animus against. We believe, the Institute for Liberty, that an Operation Choke Point style tactic could be used to silence conservative organizations and anybody who's advocating for issues and on issues that an administration declares to be fraudulent. Using this mythical 97% consensus number, someone can declare that skepticism and advocacy for skepticism to man-made climate change is tantamount to committing fraud. We also think that given what they want to do in terms of getting at, in any way possible, carbon emissions, that Operation Choke Point could be used to shut down the bank accounts and credit card payment processors of those engaged in the energy industry and who are deemed polluters by the administration.
Thank you, Andrew. This lady right here in the front row, you have the last question.
I wanted to ask about the carbon sequestration. When the EPA talks about something that doesn't really technologically exist effectively, do they mean carbon as in the element carbon, or are they talking about tracking CO2, a highly unstable gas?
Yeah, look, they're talking about taking carbon dioxide from a smokestack produced by burning something, typically coal, but it could be natural gas or wood, and piping it somewhere underground. It's technically feasible. I mean, there are pilot plants, but the EPA claims it's a proven technology which is why they are requiring it for coal-fired power plants. It raises the cost of electricity, however, and moreover, carbon dioxide is a naturally occurring gas necessary for life on Earth, and we have 400 parts per million in the atmosphere, but in our lungs we have more like 40,000 parts per million. So,
I
Okay,
can add
thank
to
you.
that. I could
Go
add
ahead,
to that. We asked Administrator McCarthy yesterday during the EPA hearing. She had a hard time answering that question about the existence of valid technology for CCS, and she was having a very difficult time putting lipstick on that pig. So.
Okay, we're going to wrap up now. Note up here what we learned. These are just an outline quickly of the principles that we learned today. More information, of course, you can always contact Congressman Flores at his office on Capitol Hill. And then we've got the Take Action page. Be sure to make a note of that. Congressman, last word.
I have an advertisement too. Bobby Jindal and I have co-written a piece called Making American Energy Superpower. If you go to our website, flores.house.gov, and take a look at this, I think it really sets a different path for the country compared to the president's and to Tom Steyer's. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for being here.